Hello guys, this is Modest Major here, bringing you some commentary over some Halo 5 Team Slayer BR's gameplay. The score in the background is not too important. I'm actually playing with a full team right now, and we were playing in the semi-pro bracket. Yesterday for some reason, we got some of the easiest games I've ever had, despite playing with a team of full semi-pros. I've had way harder lobbies than this in the past. This happened to be one of the more slightly easier ones. You know, I still don't go absolutely ham-bone, because just bear in mind, pub stompings don't happen too often on Halo 5, but like I said, yesterday was one of the more easier days, and as you can see, I'm using the new Energy Sword. The Energy Sword is not like the Prophet's Bane. The Prophet's Bane increases your movement speed, whereas the Energy Sword on this game just acts in the same way it did in previous Halo games, essentially. Although it is very hard to hit, the auto aim on it and the aim acceleration, or the magnetism, is a lot lower on this game, which I like, because, you know, I've never actually felt the feeling of choking with the sword, and it actually makes the sword feel like this weapon where, you know, a lot of people actually used to describe the sword as cheap, especially against newer players. It just seemed like you could keep them, you know, pinned in spawn, you could kind of hide with it and just get free kills, whereas the kills definitely don't feel too free with it in this game. It can be frustrating nonetheless, but at the same time, you know, I definitely feel like there's more of a skill curve to it and more of a risk-reward. But I want to talk today about how I feel Halo 5 is the most dynamic Halo game I've played in the franchise. Maybe except from Halo Combat Evolved, because that game's dynamic as heck. But nonetheless, and maybe Reach, but Reach was dynamic in a bad way, for sure. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are raising your eyebrows and want me to further explain my position on this issue, because let me just preface this by saying dynamic doesn't always mean a good thing. You know, in a lot of ways, the dynamics can lead to both a higher usability of defensive movesets as well as aggressive moveset. You know, you've got more tools in your arsenal to play, you know, in a different way. You have more ways of mixing up your opponent, of confusing your opponent, and getting in and out of situations, both aggressively and defensively. And I think what was a major draw for the Halo franchise early on, you know, in the core Halo franchise, is that it was very much gun-on-gun based. It was who is the better shooter slash strafer. Now, I know there's stuff like map positioning, and you know, power weapon control, but those only serve to accentuate, you know, who was the better shooter, I feel. You know, could you use the sniper rifle well? Could you use the rocket launcher well? And stuff like grenades and that kind of deal came in to it, but Halo 5 has just this expansive arsenal of tools up your sleeve. And really, through playing Halo 5, you know, a lot of people have given the impression that if you enjoy Halo 5, you are more of a casual player. I mean, you see this all over the Beyond Entertainment forums and certain aspects of the internet in general, certain YouTube comment sections. You know, liking Halo 5 kind of means that you've abandoned core Halo to some extent, or don't, you know, respect the core principles of core Halo. And I totally understand that, and to me, I've always had this battle going on inside my head of, like, you know, am I casual for enjoying mechanics such as this? Do I find myself, you know, wishing that I hadn't spent those 2 years becoming a Mario Kart Wii champion of the world? Do I wish that I didn't play ungodly amounts of hours in Call of Duty? Perhaps they burnt, seared into my brain, and the ramifications will be felt for the rest of time. But to be honest, the way I feel about Halo 5 right now, as the meta develops, this could change. I do think Halo 5 is a very competitive game, and I think it's a very risk-reward game, and I think it's a very enjoyable game. And one of the comparisons I want to compare Halo 5 to, it really reminds me of the fundamentals of another genre of video games, competitive video games, that is. And that is fighting games. Now, if you guys don't know, I'm kind of big into my fighting games, more so Super Smash Bros. Melee, because that one's just so fast-paced, frenetic, and it gives you like a sandbox of tools to play with. Fighting games, for me, could always get a little bit stale in terms of, you know, there's only a certain amount of events that can occur, I suppose, that it kind of becomes a rock, paper, scissors matchup, and that kind of, you know, it could evolve past that point, but for the most part there weren't many games that did it, and Super Smash Bros. Melee was one of the few games that created a sandbox fighter where you could essentially possess full control over your character in-game, and you kind of project the personality that you have, the instincts that you have, and the raw skill that you have into that game in a way in which I haven't experienced in any other fighting game to that extent. It kind of feels like in Street Fighter and in Mortal Kombat, to an extent, I become the character in which I'm playing. However, in Smash Bros. Melee, I always felt like it was a representation of me. It was me fighting up there. I could play him the way in which I wanted to, and it was kind of unique to myself. Now, the comparison I would make with Halo 5 Guardians versus other Halo games is that previous Halo games remind me of a more core fighting game where, there's less tools at your disposal, and there's maybe less room for creativity, but the better player always comes out. Whereas Super Smash Bros. Melee was always exciting for me because stuff felt like it was out of your hand. It's like taking the golden triangle of Halo and turning it into a dodecahedron. There is more options at your disposal, and there are more ways for encounters to play out. Sometimes encounters can play out in a way that is extremely defensive. They involve bait and switches, they involve conditioning, they involve spacing. It kind of reminds me of a fighting game where you're essentially putting out moves and trying to get your opponent to move into your move. You're trying to get your opponent to slip up and over-aggress by using your abilities, by mixing up your approaches. Sometimes you make it look like you're going mad aggressive with the thruster pack and you're going to come right at them, and then all of a sudden you pull back and it's a bait and switch. You've got your team ready there to team shot the living heck out of them. You get opportunities to use the ground pound in a way where you read your opponent, you read where their movement is going to go, and you get inside of their head. I've never played a Halo game where I get inside people's head more so than I do with Halo 5. And I know there's certain issues that people have with the pacing of the shooter, of feeling like they're taking too long to get into the shooter, into the the straight up heads up gunfight. But for me, some of those moments are some of the most exciting moments of Halo 5, where there's this build up to this kill. I'm setting this trap. I'm setting this mental battle of when are you going to make your move? Who's going to push first? Who's going to make the mistake first? Who's going to over-aggress? Who's not going to aggress at the right time? There's a key difference there. You can do both. You can aggress at a time where it's completely unexpected. It seems stupid. You play with your opponent's mental faculties. And I understand that this game has evolved in quite a way where perhaps it doesn't represent your average core Halo title in some ways. I know elements of the gunplay really do carry on in terms of power weapons, in terms of gunplay, but in terms of the ways that you mix up your opponent and you have this battle before a battle, to an extent, you have this mental battle, you have this sizing each other up. I don't necessarily think that it's a negative thing for me, for my money, and for a lot of other people's money. I think it adds another layer to the combat. You don't just win in terms of being the better Halo shooter. You win in terms of setting up for a certain trap, setting up for a certain, prediction, or a bait and switch, as I was saying earlier. And you capitalize on your opponent's mistakes in a big way. And once you play a situation in your mind before the situation happens, you preemptively decide what's going to happen, and then you pull it off. It's one of the most satisfying feelings I've had in gaming. And the only reason that this is possible to do is because you have more tools at your disposal. You have thruster packs to mix up your opponent. You have this sprint, which albeit has its punishers because it's tied to shield. You have this sprint to get in and out of situations, to push from a different degree, and to rush down your opponent and back off your opponent at the right times. And to me, it's fast-paced, it's fun, and it's more sandboxy. The engagements are more sandboxy than any Halo I've played. And I know it's personal preference, and I know I'm not going to convince some people on this issue, because some people just want to have the straight-up BR, golden triangle, grenades, outplay your opponent, and they want to know they've outplayed their opponent, whereas this adds layers upon layers which might confuse the situation for you. And it's just personal preference, but that's where I'm coming from with my enjoyment. I don't think I'm a casual. I genuinely enjoy when I outplay someone on this game, or when I'm outplayed, vice versa. I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary. I've been Modest Major. Thanks for watching. Peace out.